Welcome to the studio. I'm Keme Nzerem, and I'm delighted to introduce my esteemed panel here who are going to talk to us about something that every CISO needs to know. Post-attack, what are the learnings?
One of our suppliers was a critical supplier. They got absolutely smashed. It was a very, very simple attack, and they easily got into the domain controllers, encrypted those, took out a company based in 17 locations. They had a very, very small IT department, no cybersecurity staff, and you can imagine that there was chaos. And that's at one end of the spectrum, and you get very sophisticated organizations that have teams that are very on it. They rehearse their playbooks. Their board understands, but they've all got supply chains, and that's often the weak underbelly in a lot of organizations, because the suppliers typically don't have the same wherewithal funding, deep pockets that the big banks and the others have.
Little pieces of advice that I will give to anyone that is hearing this is, of course, keep the two tracks completely separated. You have your technicians, they are super stressed, they need to fix, they need to understand, they need to solve, and they are techies. They don't want to inform the C-level. And then you have the C-level that they want to know what's going on. So just our role is to bridge those two gaps and inform and get the technical knowledge and transform it into managerial information.
One of the things that crosses your mind is, what happens if it goes wrong? And if you don't know what the processes are, then you need to review them and determine what you want to happen as a CISO. I mean, the key thing here is that, a cyber breach, like it or not, really isn't something that can be handled as part of a normal business operation. It's almost like the definition of it. As you participate in a crisis, the decisions you take actually contribute to the crisis, maybe in a positive or a negative way. So it's to recognize that the actions you take and the decisions you take are actually, going to critically affect the outcomes. And to be unaware of that is dangerous.
It's a business impacting issue, so we need to make sure that the business know they've got roles and responsibilities, and there's two-way streets in that. One of the key challenges I've seen is, people rushing back with answers when they haven't fully investigated it, and then you go off, I call them false starts.
There is that time pressure, isn't there?
There is a time pressure, but you have to know when to just push back and say, I need more time to look into this. And I've seen in many incidents, a supplier typically comes back and is often keen to say, it's this. Everyone goes looking into that, and it turns out to be a dead end, and it's hours of wasted time and resources where, maybe taking another 10 minutes, as little as that, could have, eradicated several, false starts in that situation.
User awareness and training is so important. There are almost like Janet and John, Rule 101 type things, thou shalt not do. But you'd be amazed, in most organizations, if you launch a campaign, a phishing campaign, you'd be amazed at how many people will click on the link. And you'll be amazed that some people will actually click on a link and then give their credentials. It happens, and there's no substitute for user awareness training, because a lot of the attacks to actually download the payload come in via phishing attacks.
When it's so sophisticated, we still fail ourselves, right? So how can we ask our users to be 100% alert when they get hundreds of emails per day and so on, right? So it's about consistently on a monthly by monthly basis to send these simulations so they are keeping alert.
I mean, things like security awareness are really about the prevention rather than the response and reaction to situations. But the real issue around crisis management is the human piece. It's how people respond. It's creating that muscle memory so that when stuff goes wrong, people know what to do. They know because they've done it in rehearsals.
People don't want to do more training courses, do they? Come and do this online cyber. How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it interesting?
It's more about it gives people an understanding of what the impact is of what, I guess it's the butterfly effect, how one small action can create a ripple throughout the organisation. I think phishing is a really key point, because it's something that, we've moved beyond the very poorly spelt, attacks that we had, several years ago to
I'm
now.
a rich prince and I wish to...
Yeah, exactly. But what we found when we actually go and work with organisations and we look in the sort of the aftermath is for an individual to actually find out how to report an incident, it's not as easy. You know, often outside of the IT team or the security team, actually knowing where to go to make it known as quickly as possible in that critical few minutes that something's happened can be quite challenging.
Questions from our audience?
We're talking about post-incident, right? So if you've suffered a breach of some sort, that breach has impacted one of your critical third parties, one of your suppliers. What's your position after that?
Immediately, it's pull up the drawbridge, because the one thing as a CISO or anybody in the cybersecurity team that you don't want is the proliferation of the malware, ransomware, whatever the strain happens to be, in your own network. You don't want that, because depending on the organisation you work in, there's a myriad of ways in which suppliers connect to the organisation. I won't actually pull down the drawbridge until I'm satisfied I know exactly what the ransomware strain or whatever the malware strain is, checked with our EDR and all the different tools, that we don't have any occurrence of that in our own network. Also, that someone very senior in the organisation has stated that they are now clean. They called in the cavalry, the IR team typically, and they've actually managed the breach. Because the last thing that you want is any proliferation in your own network.
Things like, have they got your data? Are they processing your data on your behalf? And if so, and it's a cyber breach, you've been notified, then, understanding the extent to which and the amount of data you've got and the risk associated with it being, breached and put on the dark web, for example, needs to be understood. There's a broad piece around putting your arms around that supplier and understanding the total risk, and then understanding what you do as an organization to make sure you build operational resilience so that you're protected against the supplier going down and going out.
I think it's super crucial to improve the partnership and the connection with the supplier, that they inform you, that you are not contacted by your CEO telling you, hey, Thomas, have you heard about this being hacked? Are we safe? That's crucial, right? That's how business should work. Right?
There's many layers to that, but I think it's the transparency with the supplier and making sure they're driving that information to you. I think any supplier that hides behind this is a black box service, you don't need to know that. Those are the sort of red flags that I've seen in these types of situations. But if they're open, honest, transparent, then ultimately, I guess it comes down to a risk-based decision of how they impact your business.
Knowing that you can rely on a threat intelligence partner who can actually tell you that the chatter and the forums on the dark web, they're trading your data or something like that, being on the front foot so you can react to it is so, so important.
Sadly, this is a topic that is not going away, but if we could give a round of applause for our brilliant panel. Howard, Thomas, Matt and David. I'm Keme Nzerem. This is The Studio.